Okay, we're on page 135 in the Maimanasan Aliyas Yektana, and now we're going to learn about what the Kisei in the Pasuk in Tanakh that the Isha Shunamis says, let us make a bed, a table, a chair, and a menorah for this holy person that passes by, and we'll make him a room, and he can have his peace and quiet over there. So the Rebbe is following up on what it says in the Holy Zohar, that these four things are ways of being metakin, of correcting the Shechina, because the Shechina is in Golus. So the origin of the idea that we find in this Maimer isn't Chassidus, it's in Kabbalah, in Zohar HaKadosh. But as usual, Chassidus elaborates upon it, and not only elaborates, but brings it down to Seichel Adam. And this Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, in greater detail, makes it more relevant on a practical level. So let's go. V'hinei Kisei Krishma. Kisei is Krishma. The Parsha, the Harishon, the Krishma, who Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Shema Yisrael, and he teaches, he says it in Yiddish. Ayid der Hert. Shema doesn't only mean to hear; it means to be attentive. So in Yiddish, there's a word Heren. Heren means to listen, to hear. But then there's another Yiddish word which is der Heren, the Daled Ayin Reish, or der Hert, which means not only that you listen superficially, but you pay attention attentively and concentrate on what you're hearing. So in Yiddish, that idea is expressed through that one word, der Hert or der Heren. So the Rebbe says, Shema Yisrael, Ayid der Hert, Ayid realizes and concentrates as Hashem Elokeinu, that Hashem Elokeinu is Hashem Echad. This is what the Yid focuses on. And now the Rebbe is going to explain what that means. The Hine Yisrael, the word Yisrael, Koi al Nefesh Eliki. It's a reference to the godly soul, Shehu Chelik Elekamima, which is an actual part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Tevas Yisrael, the word Yisrael, who is comprised of two words, Yoshar Keil, Yosor Keil, meaning that the Keil, the godliness, is Yosar from the word, it's not Yoshor, right? Because it's Yisrael, it's a sin, right? It's not Yisrael, it's Yisrael with a sin. So when you divide the word into two, Moshe, it's Yosor Keil, not Yashar Keil. Okay? I want to make it clear. What does
Yasar mean?
One second. What's the root word of Yasar? Sar. Srara. Dominion.
Minister.
Dominion and control. Yosar Keil. The Keil controls. Yes?
Like when the Malach says to Yaakov, Kisarita.
Exactly. That's the makar, the source of it in the Torah. Yosar Keil, Dal Nefesh Elikis, back to the text. He who Pchinas Keil. It is the level of Keil. What is Keil? Says the Rebbe. The Lamed of the word Keil, Heim Hamida is the Nefesh Elikis. They refer to the emotions of the Nefesh Elikis. The Bisharshan, if you look at their root, Heim Gemul Pchinas, this refers to the three levels called Netzach, Hoid, Yesoid. Endurance, splendor, what they call splendor, acknowledgement, Hoid, or glory, and Yesoid, foundation of communication. In other words, three methods of emotions. So, Ukamay Havlad, take for example a child, a fetus. Shehu be'iber, which is Kishehu be'iber, when the infant is in a state of pregnancy in the mother's womb, the fetus, Hineroishe ben Birkov, the head of the Vlad is ben Birkov, between its knees. The Gemara says that. So too in the Nimshul, in the moral, Ukamoy Kain, who Bahanefesh Elikis, so it's also with the Nefesh Elikis, with the godly soul. K'moisha who be'ibur the way the nefesh elokis in pregnancy state, before it's drawn and invested into a body, it is subordinate to the midos. Sharihu tlas klilin goy tlas. Okay. You have three, right? Netzach, hoy, yisoid. Each one has another element in it. In other words, let's say netzach, endurance. There is endurance that's only with netzach, nitzachon. There is endurance coming with an element, with a tinge of acknowledgement, and there's endurance coming with communication. So if you do 3 times 3, that's the emotions. Then you have endurance the way it is with Chochmah Bina Das, creative endurance, analytical endurance, and focused endurance. That's Chochmah Bina Das. But all of these are within the father figure, the mother in this case, as he says, which has the fetus. So going back to the mashal, to the nimshul, the nefesh elokis is kale 30, right? 30, because 3 times 10, because each of the 3 has 10 in it as subordinate issues and elements. The format of Netzach expresses itself in 10 different ways, although it's all a tnuah, a feeling of endurance. But there is exciting endurance and boring endurance, high endurance and low endurance, bright endurance and foolish endurance. You have all kinds of formats. So basically we encapsulate all of them into 10. But the father figure, what you're doing is you're enduring. So therefore, kale is 30. Ve'enim is gala kiyim b'bchinas netzachoid v'yisoid. The 30, the 10 aspects within each of the 3 don't reveal themselves. In other words, what's felt here is the netzach. In other words, if someone observes you, they don't see that you came to this endurance because you have compassion. They just see the bottom line, that you're enduring. Right? So that's why he says that it's like pregnancy. It's the fetus, as the fetus is in a fetal position with Roishoy, its head, Bein Birkov, between its knees. That's the position of the fetus in the mother's womb. So is there already a fully formed fetus with all of the body parts? Absolutely. But it's swallowed. It's Bein Birkov. It's between its knees. It's not the head, the Rosh, as the fetus is in the mother's womb, is not recognizable. Not, of course, you can see it on a scan, on an ultrasound. But what we mean to say is that it's not functioning. And what's the functioning of the head at that time, of the fetus at that time? It's digestion. It's the food attached through the right. That's how it survives. Even though it has a rosh, but the rosh doesn't become superior until birth. So the Rebbe says, going back to kale, Yisrael, Yasar kale. Kale is Aleph Lamed. These 3 things of endurance, splendor, and communication are themselves included of 10. So the lamed, okay, this is the bottom line, Avram. The lamed of the word kale, Yisrael, lamed, 30, refers through 30 different emotional expressions of the godly soul. Yeah, okay? Can you imagine? I'd like to see us do a chart and document each of the 30 positions. It would be a very interesting study. Let's go on. And the purpose of why the neshama was sent into the world is for the benefit of an aliyah, of an ascension. Shehi aliyah nanasis. This aliyah is caused through the nefesh elikis working here below. Believe me, that through studying Torah, doing mitzvahs. Maisi is practical mitzvahs. Uvachol hanagoisav al pi Torah, and all of its custom based on Torah. V'hainu. This refers to not only just learning the base meditation for yourself and putting on your tefillin and mezuzahs, but bevira calling yon olam, refining all matter that it's around you. The grass that's on your lawn, the sidewalk that's before your office, the baseball game that you go to, or whatever, soccer game, you take your kids or grandkids, you have to be mevarer. You hear that? Moshe went up to Tveri the other day. The thinking should be by the people on the route going up. What are we doing to be mevarer the car that we're driving in on the highway, on Kvish Echad or Kvish Shesh, whatever you took to go there? And if one doesn't have the consciousness, they're losing an opportunity of birur at that time. Because the world needs birur olam. Every one of us. And that's why the Frierdiker Rebbe, our author, in the 1940s was very much, he started a campaign of Taras HaAvir. Purify the air. You want to get rid of air pollution, spiritual air pollution? Think and say words of Mishnayos, words of Tilim, words of Torah, words of Tanya as you walk in the street. And we saw this. I tell the story of a chassid who had a job. He was a truck driver. And they came and they offered him an easier job. So he says, I don't want that easier job because although physically it's easier, but I'll be occupied with my mind and I won't be able to just sit and recite words of Torah as I drive the truck for miles and miles and miles. So the idea is you're being mevarer the olam. You're being mevarer the world. So even if you don't have a sefer, you have an opportunity to think Torah and especially say Torah. So I want to humbly, or maybe not humbly, but anyway, suggest to everyone to memorize some words of Torah, really, that you ingrain and the rest of your life you'll be able to recite them. That's what we did as boys and as teenagers, and I remember things, for the rest of my life, so I can always pull them out of the hat and say them. So it's never too late, it's never too late. So a good recommendation would actually be the 12 psukim that the Rebbe suggested, several from Tanakh, and several from from Mishnah, and several from Chassidus, like from Tanya. Those are called the 12 psukim. They're not just for children. The Rebbe said that the children should memorize them and say them during the children rallies in 770. My dear friends, they're also for us. So there are 12 very short sentences, and they're very, very potent, exactly, and they bring about a message. So if you are looking for something kind of easier to memorize, I would suggest that. Let's go further. But the idea is you have to be mevarer calling yon elam aseisam kelim lelikus, to make all matter of gashmias vessels for godliness. So this is a point that Chassidus talks a lot about, Avi, and it's something that sometimes we glance over, and really it's important to understand that every time you spiritualize Gashmias, you've made it a keli for likus. Could you imagine someone says, hey, I saw God in your comfort seat at home. Wait a minute, I'm looking at it, I don't see it. But yesterday you were learning Torah on it, and I sense that. That's the idea. You're making kelim lelikus. V'zehu aleph, says the Rebbe. This is the aleph of the word kale. Yasar kale, aleph. Shehu hanesinas koyach b'lamayla. Aleph refers to God, the one who gives the koyach from above, al avodas habirurim, to do what we call the activity of birurim, of refinement. It's not easy, Avi, to stand there and train people to shoot, like I saw in the pictures you sent me the other day, and thank you for that. And in order, and somehow be able to communicate the birur. Yeah, of course, it's for protection. So that itself already, you're in the misgeret, in the category of holiness, because you're training someone to protect himself. I understand. But let's say in every movement of the gun, and whatever, in your field that you know so well. So the Rebbe says, you need help. And who gives you the help? Aleph. Alufi Shaloilam. Kale. Alufi Shaloilam gives a Yid assistance to succeed in the Avodah Birudim. And there's another point here you have to know. The Avodah Birudim is fraught with risk. It's not easy, Avram. I tell the story, maybe you didn't hear it, Avram, since you joined us, of the time when I was at the one of the yeshivas in Meir Shorim. It's about 20 years ago. And I saw some fellas on the steps as I was going into the Beis Medrash, smoking cigarettes, and it seemed to me they were wasting time, and I started a conversation with them to engage them in conversation. And of course they said right away, oh, you're a Chabadnik, and right away, yeah. So I say, you guys would do so much more for the Jews of Eretz Yisrael if you go out to the kibbutzim and the moshavim and you settle there and you share everything you know from Meir Shorim and Geula. I mean, how you grew up, it's a gold mine. So the guy turned to me very seriously and said to me, you're right, but we would fail and drown there. You, Chabadniks, are trained to go there and remain authentic and frum and committed and everything else. We weren't trained there. We were trained to be insular, to remain in Meir Shorim. And if we go out, the taivas, we would be lured into the taivas and we would fail. This is what he told me. I'll never forget it. The Rebbe says here, the Avodah of Biruri requires the Aleph, because that fellow who told me that, he's right in the sense you need a lot of siyata d'shmaya to succeed when you go out to a desolate desert. And plenty of people have failed. I'm not just talking about in Chabad, I'm talking about in general, where people have kind of been macho and they say they're going to go here, there, and everywhere, and then the next thing you know it, they've taken a left turn and they're gone. They're elsewhere. They're not doing the Avodah Shabirudim. They're doing the Avodah of serving themselves and doing disgusting things and hurting themselves and hurting others. So you need kale.
Rabbi Dalton.
Yes.
I understand that the shluchim are vaccinated to protect against the assimilation. What about their children who are then put out into an environment where they may not have peers that they can play with and they can learn with, and they're influenced by kids who are in all kinds of fashidin zachim?
Very good question. I can answer it from my own experience with my children. And the answer is that it begins in the home. First of all, let me say something else. First of all, Avi, there's no guarantees. The whole idea of guaranteeing, that your children follow in your path, and that whole idea is not coming from holiness. It really isn't. Because at the end of the day, everyone has free will, and everyone has to make their own decision. Nevertheless, given that reality that I just said, and it's not because I'm saying it, because that's the fact, as the Torah HaKadosh teaches us in so many ways. The next thing is, the parents have so much to do with how kids will be later. And I've seen this, and I just discussed it with a friend of mine. I mean, I could write a book about it, but I wouldn't, because it would be very hurtful to many people. But I've seen parents who start becoming modern, with on the edge, a little bit here and a little bit there. And I could point to you the results of that modernity, black and white, in the street, in the next generation and generations. So yes, there is mazel. I'm not taking that away. There's mazel. But there's also a script that, and this is my rule, I just said it this morning to a friend. The Gemara, Mishnah says, regarding a shofar, Avi, Kol de Poshid Mailet Fei. A shofar, the more twisted it is, the more complicated it is to get the sound out from the mouth, because it has to go through all the twists. If you have a straight yal, it's a yal poshit, it says the Mishnah. You have the horn of a buck, and it's straight, not twisted, says the Mishnah, Kol de Poshit. The more simple and straight it is, Tfei, it's better. The more you live with simplicity, and not, what's the word I'm looking for in English? It's called ostentatious. Sophistication, ostentatious, over the top. Generally speaking, you're going to get better results. Number 3, it's a good regarding what you asked. The Rebbe was asked, and it's printed in his letters, is it better to send a child or friends' children or people you meet, to tell them to go to a conservative day school or a public school? And shluchim in the 50s and 60s, 70s confronted, this was because the conservative movement was very strong in the 40s and 50s and the 60s, and it started to dwindle then, and shluchim who went out to all of these places, S. Louis and Pennsylvania and LA and all over, had this issue. And the Rebbe writes, it's better to tell them to go to a public school than to a conservative day school. And why? They shouldn't be farmished. If they go to a conservative day school and all of a sudden there's conversation about eliminating certain parts of the davening because it's not relevant because we don't have a Beis HaMikdash, and who says Mashiach is true, and on what the conservative movement Nebuch from the 50s on, the JTS started to abolish, and I had discussions with professors about that way many years ago. That's very confusing. It's very confusing. But you go to a public school, it's not a Jewish school. I'm using that, Avi, as an example with the children, the shluchim's children. Usually, they know that they're the frumies in the community, and the other people are not. And those children, what I've observed over the years, come out more frum and chassidish and whatever else. Where I've seen a problem, Avi, one second, is when a shliach is living in a modern Orthodox community. And that is a very difficult thing, because there, the rabbi and Rebbetzin, the Chabad shluchim, invite everybody to their house for a meal, for a topah, right? And they come with their small yarmulkes and their trim beards and the pants, and they say, the kids turn around and say, they're Shema Shabbos, and they are Shema Shabbos. So they want to wear a little Pepsi Cola yarmulke. Why can't I? Why do I have to wear a big black yarmulke? What's wrong with a little Pepsi Cola yarmulke? There it becomes much more complicated. And I've actually seen the results by some, and it's not good results. Does that mean to say they should vacate? No. But they need to find ways of mitigating that issue. And so there, it's more of an issue. But when you're living in a non-religious community, I haven't seen the majority, leaving the path or not following. What we are seeing today, even in shluchim's families all across the board worldwide, is a sense of not doing the shlichus, not wanting to be on shlichus, and going into business. And there's reason for that too. And it's a whole discussion. Maybe one day we could fabreng about it. But that I have seen, and it's becoming more and more as we speak. And I understand it. I do understand it. It's if you sit back and you could be objective and not get personally involved, I think we could understand the reason for that. And I'm not sure if we could mitigate it today the way Chabad would like to. And I think today it's more important to share the message. And Baruch Hashem, I've seen this in certain Chabad houses and communities with Anash, where the rabbis themselves who have children who are not shluchim are finally sharing the message of be a good yid, be a frum yid, be a Torah yid, learn Torah, do mitzvahs, help out the Chabad house. And we find many more people doing that, especially young people like my son. Mamish, you can't imagine how he is without the official title shliach. He does probably more than some of the shluchim, but he doesn't want the title. He feels it's arrogant. He doesn't want it. Meanwhile, he's the one saying shalom aleichem to everyone in shul, smiling to everyone, putting on tefillin with them, and learning and running around doing mitzvahs. The shluchim do it too, but they have financial responsibility, fundraising, community responsibilities, kashrus organizations, So there's been, from what I can see, kind of a movement of young delight of newly married and younger people married with 1, 2, 3, 4 kids, going into business, hoping to make lots of money and make a difference in the community. Okay, Reb Hillel, it's your chance. I'm sorry, Bashi.
I just wanted to share a memory in response to Avi's question. I was in Japan once, and I made arrangements with the shaliach there to spend Shabbos with them. And so he told me a certain hotel to go in. It was Tokyo is this vast, vast city, so every neighborhood seems to go on forever and ever. And I end up in this hotel. I can't read anything, like any of the signs or anything. And Shabbos is coming in. It's Friday afternoon, and I'm just supposed to wait by the entrance. And the shaliach had sent his 2 boys, like 8, 9, to find me, and to walk me to this place. And it was so remarkable to me, how the maturity these boys had in terms of just knowing who they were and what their mission was. And I couldn't believe it when we're walking, like we must have walked 30 minutes from the hotel to their house. I couldn't have, it was, I would have been impressed, with older kids being able to do that. So I just wanted to share that sometimes it works in that way too. You have just a really clear sense that you're different and you're there on a mission.
That's right.
And just to say something really positive, about the shaliach there, the next time I came was a year after what they call in Japan 3/11, which was the first anniversary after the Fukushima disaster. And the Chabad shaliach there had during Fukushima he had commandeered a bakery and trucks and was delivering food to people who had survived that disaster. So when I was there, he was getting like commendations from the government and so on. It was just a real Kiddush Hashem.
Anyone, Moshe, you wanted to say something?
Just that what you mentioned about let's say younger generation, children of shluchim. I've been observing that now for a long time, and certainly in a community like Ramat Bet Shemesh, so mixed religiously, so many different types. We've spoken about this many times. It's has a lot of unique challenges, but from my vantage point, we've also spoken about this, I see there's also a lot of unique opportunities. That the issue of, if it's very easy if you're living in a community that you're the shaliach and like the only option is public school. And it's much easier than if you're in like a very mixed community. But at the same time, you have to find to become, I think, much, much more sophisticated and you have to move a person's ashkafa and outlook on life and how they look at Yiddishkeit to a whole new level.
Right.
Okay.
And I understand that. Okay, back to the text. So we're talking about. I diverted for a moment because the Rebbe says here the Aleph of Kale gives a Yid Nesinas Koach Avi Milmaila. It's the power that a Jew gets from heaven, from God, from Hashem, al avodas habirurim, to succeed. And that's why. So I elaborated. Why do you need that? Why can't I just take an apple, make a bracha, and go on? So I was just emphasizing there's a lot of challenges, and it's not easy. Birurim, and you really need the koyach of the Eibishter to be able to go into a yishuv and a kibbutz and stay strong and not be lured into the taivas. Let's continue. Shezeu inyan hashbo, says the Rebbe, this is analogous to the oath, Masha mashbi'in oisoi, which the neshama, the soul, receives right before it goes into the world, which is Tehi Tzaddik. This is from the opening chapter in Tanya, quoting Tractate Nida. Be righteous. Shezeu inyan hasoveya, this is the satiation, b'nesinas koyach, of the giving of koyach, sheyuchal levarer bedurim. That's why we get a shvuah. Okay, Chevra? The Gemara says, yes, Hillel.
I just want to understand this idea of being soveya b'nesinos koach. Meaning in the sense like fulfillment?
Soveya means being filled up. The tank is being filled up with gas. Hashem fills up our neshama. He satiates our soul with this nesinas koach. In other words, it's the atom that God gives us that can, if used right, will explode in a positive way and help us do whatever we need to do. I don't know if that's a great mushal, explosion, but the concept is it's like it's planted within. So it's soveya. It's satiated within us. Do you understand now?
I think so. I mean, it's just a curious metaphor or analogy.
Right. But you when you learn Tanya, remember the word mashbi'in has three meanings: shavua, soveya, and sheva.
So is there a kind of inference on the other meanings here as well?
Not here. In other places there is, but not here.
Okay.
Good. And if you want to know more about it, look into the commentaries on Tanya. You'll see it over there.
Yeah, in fact, Baruch and I are right in this in chapter 15 in the Chasidus Mivueres, where he's talking about the shvu of Tiet Tzadik, and he asked the question, why, if you've already made the shvu to be a tzaddik, why do you then have to say not to be a Russia?
Right. That's another part to it. Okay. Let me just finish with these words. V'hu pchinas nehiru de chochmei ilah, and this is the light of the supernal chokhmah. That's a Kabbalistic level, and we're just going to leave it at that. He's just telling you, if for the record, if you want to know what you asked Hillel about the soveya, so the Rebbe says this is what the Kabbalah refers to as nehiru, the illumination, the light, the chokhmasa ilah, of the supernal chokhmah. So Monday, when we resume, we'll explain more. But what we're concluding here with an idea that is self-contained. Yisrael is Yasar Kale. Lamed is the 30 emotional attributes, nuances of the Nefesh Elokis. And for them to be accessed, you need the Aleph, Aluf Shalaylam, to help the Nefesh Elokis. Right? When we say, Hillel, that there's a shvuah, who's getting the shvuah? God is administering an oath, the Gemara says, to the soul before it comes into the world. Which part of the soul? So when you learn Tanya, you understand it's the godly soul. Why does the godly soul need an oath? Because it has a challenge when it enters the body, the nefesh habamis. So it needs to it needs to have something within itself that if used right, will be able to overpower the lures of the nefesh habamis. So who gets the shvuah? The nefesh elikis. Sar Kale. It's Aleph Lamed. The Lamed is the Lamed of the nefesh elikis, not the nefesh habamis. The purpose of which, as we're going to learn in the next year, the purpose of which is to elevate the nefesh habamis.
So another question from this, when he says that the shoresh of the midos of the nefesh elokis are in netzach, hod, and yesod. I thought that in the Tanya it explains that the source of the spiritual, the positive spiritual emotions of the godly soul are Ava and Yira, which I thought were associated with Chochmah and Bina.
No, Ava and Yira are associated with Chesed and Gevurah and Tiferes.
Oh, Chesed, okay.
Which are derivatives of Ava. But so the question that either you mean to ask or it would be a good question to ask is, why does the Rebbe say here that the Shadish, the 30 is Netzach Hod Yesod, why not Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferes?
Right. Okay.
I want to think about that. That's what I'm thinking about right now.
Good question.
Okay, I want to leave you. It's Shabbos. This Shabbos, the Chabad custom is to get an Aliyah because it's Yud Shvat next week, and the Rebbe wrote in the letter that he published for the first yahrzeit of the previous Rebbe, everyone should try to get an Aliyah. So in your shuls, if you don't think you're going to be getting Aliyah, if you're able to ask the Gabbai. Now sometimes Shachris, they have a simcha, maybe you can do it at mincha time, or sometimes you might need to go to another shul. I mean, in Chabad shuls, usually they make multiple minyanim, but not in other shuls. So if you're able to follow and you want to follow this minhag, it's this Shabbos that we take an Aliyah, like we would take an Aliyah for a parent the Shabbos before. And the other things we'll talk about, Mitzvah Shem on Yud Shvat. Have a good day, a good night of Shabbos, and only Psudas Tavis to everyone. B'simcha, l'chaim.
Good Shabbos, Bill.
L'chaim, l'chaim.